Reading 92 from the Psychological Commentaries on the Teaching of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky by Maurice Nicoll, Volume 2. Quarmede, Ugle, September 8, 1945. Commentary on Inner Freedom. Inner freedom is not a thing that is gained by outer compulsion. We cannot impose freedom on a person by law, nor can a person gain inner freedom by being made to undergo any form of training or discipline. Sometimes when you are half awake in the morning, you catch a glimpse of what inner freedom means. You are still asleep to life and awake to some other level where all the different forms of slavery that our personality imposes on us, all our different forms of internal considering, and all the cares and anxieties of existence are still, as it were, beneath us at a lower level. And then, the next instant, you are right down in that level, and ironically enough, we call this being fully awake. We lose this feeling of ourselves, which we had a moment previously, and which is a form of self-remembering and belongs to the third state of consciousness, and descend by a very rapid lift to the second state of consciousness. You remember what G said of the second state of consciousness, which we call, in the Western world, full consciousness. He said, in this state of so-called full consciousness, which I call a state of sleep, millions of sleeping people kill millions of other sleeping people. Thousands of sleeping people write books, which thousands of other sleeping people read. And everything happens in the only way it can happen as long as people remain asleep. However, we do not see clearly enough the nature of this sleeping life that humanity is always leading. So we have not sufficient strength to keep apart from it internally, because we think it is leading somewhere, and so we identify with it and hope for the best. It is through the terrible power of identifying that we get caught up in it, and usually by the most trivial and absurd things, and so we lose all traces of our inner freedom and serve nature, that is, this enormous machine called organic life, this pain factory. According to the great work principle demonstrated so plainly, so very clearly in the ray of creation, a higher level is under fewer laws than a lower level. When we drop in our level, we therefore pass under more laws. We pass, for example, into all our forms of internal accounting, into our personal likes and hatreds. The greater the depth of sleep, the greater the number of laws we are under. The greater the state of sleep, the more we are dependent. For example, we desire encouragement, praise, appreciation, and seem to have nothing strong enough to maintain itself independently. We derive our feeling of ourselves from outside. I can assure you that a sense of the work will begin to give you independence and inner strength, and this I am going to connect tonight in this commentary with the idea of inner freedom. But to gain this, you have to serve the work and not nature. For this reason, it is said that for a man to become free, he must first of all put himself under more laws than other people, and by this is meant under the laws of the work. But these laws of the work cannot remain forms of blind external obedience, but become things that you acknowledge and understand, and eventually will for yourself. Through perceiving their truth, we give assent to them, and through beginning to live according to them through our own assent and acknowledgement, we make it possible for them to begin to change our being. They set up within us a set of new connections in the mind, and this attracts essence, and in this way they form channels of connections which relate us to a higher level, and so give us an inner power to resist the continued impacts of external life, the world of the newspapers, etc. In other words, we begin to resist and eventually transform the incoming impressions of life. And instead of reacting to them mechanically and being wholly identified, wholly upset, wholly worried by them, we may begin to be able to use them as material for work on ourselves. Now, the more truth you see in the work, through applying it to yourself by means of self-observation, the more free you will become. Yes, but how can you expect to have any degree of inner freedom if you are at the mercy of every change, every event, every little incident in external life? If everything upsets you so easily, how can you have inner freedom? You serve life. You serve nature. If you are always habitually worried and feel this is the best state to be in, how can you have inner freedom? If you are always negative, how can you have inner freedom? If you never seek to deal with the many giant forms of identifying, how can you have inner freedom? If you always justify and so support your poor false personality that lives so narrowly and proudly, how can you have inner freedom? How indeed can you understand what the work is about if you do not grasp that one of the things we have to do is to pass through the day without having been caught and fastened by everything, and not without having attempted to transform the effects of any particular set of impressions of things said or done by others? We have spoken recently of the necessity of isolating oneself from life, and in this connection it was said that a person in the work should practice self-remembering at least once a day, and that if they cannot do that, they must practice it 3 times a day. That is, they must make still greater efforts. All self-remembering is to lift you out of the whirlpool and uproar and dreariness going on in yourself and caused by life acting on you mechanically, and by your looking to life as your only nourisher, your only source of happiness. If you have no conception of what self-remembering is, if you understand nothing about there being a higher level in yourself that you can attain to, then simply try to practice complete stopping of thought for a second if you can, because it is better than nothing. It will at least break the chain of mechanical associations for a moment, and may possibly enable something else to reach you which otherwise is impossible. At the last meeting, we spoke of intelligent effort, and therefore by implication of useless effort. We spoke about intelligent effort in connection with the idea of number 4 man or balanced man, and we shall speak of this again and many times again, but one of the first conceptions that you can make in your minds of intelligent effort is that you can make effort about what the work teaches you to make effort about. It teaches you to work against identifying, imagination, self-justifying, negative emotions, internal considering, and many other things, so please do not decide that an intelligent effort consists in giving up smoking, let us say. When I hear of effort of this kind, I wonder whether the person concerned has ever understood what the work is about. Surely it is much more important for a man to observe one of his typical forms of negative emotion, one of his typical bitternesses, one of his typical prejudices, one of his typical forms of depression or of being unpleasant to other people, or one of his typical forms of wrong criticism or of lying, and to try to work against that. To make such effort requires self-observation, that is, application of the work to yourself. When a person says to me that he has decided that he must make aim not to smoke so much, I wonder whether he has ever observed himself in the light of the work teaching